个是锁起来的，这边。
各位贵宾早安，欢迎各位莅。
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2022 review meeting of the second report under the CRC. We will cover chapter 1 to 4, and I would like to introduce to you some of the government representatives. The Deputy Head of Delegates, Ms. Li Fenli, Deputy Minister from MOHW, and Deputy Minister Tsai from MOJ, Deputy Minister from Ministry of Education. Thank you for coming. And this is how this session is going to proceed. So one round of questions will be given, and government representatives will give the first round of answers. If you are to respond to the questions, please raise your hand. A mic will be handed to you. Simultaneous interpreting will be provided throughout the session in order for interpreters to hear you clearly and interpret your comments. When you speak, please pay attention to your pace. Without further ado, Mr. Chair, you have the floor.
Meeting.
It works. Good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure to see so many people interested in this dialogue between the government of Taiwan and the Review Committee. As already was explained, it's a Q&A matter, but it is part of the tradition of this kind of meetings when they take place in Geneva, that the head of the governmental delegation is invited to make a brief presentation of the report, but you also may not do that. It's up to you, because you may not be prepared to have that particular presentation. I assume that everybody in this room knows what there is in your report, and so you don't need to explain that in an introduction. So we then, if you don't want to have that particular introduction of your report, then we start our dialogue this morning in the order of the report and the order that is also internationally practiced. And it means that we start with the first part of the report, and that is chapter 1 on the general measures of implementation. It is a chapter that is, I think, to a large degree at least, based on Article 4 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which requires that states parties to the Convention shall undertake a range of different measures for the implementation of the rights of the child. So the first questions, particularly on this measure, on this chapter on general measures, will be raised by Professor Nevena Vukovic from Serbia. And she has the floor to open the dialogue with questions on your report and the part on the general measures of implementation. Dr. Nevena Vukovic.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me? Yes, yes, good. Good, it's good. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. And hello to everyone. I'm very happy that we started this process of state review and the dialogue on the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child in Taiwan. I think it's a very important moment. For me, it's extremely interesting, and I'm very happy because it's my first time with you and first time with this group. And for them, they are already a team who knows how to play because they've been playing before. So I'll move on to what we call cluster number 1. And this is a cluster that deals with the general measures of implementation and I can say with the infrastructure which is needed in any country so that all rights of the child can be realized. And I will try to be very brief, and I will not cut my let's say my slot of questions in 2, but I will ask several questions, so if we can note down on all measures of implementation, and then you can proceed with your replies, and then we can have some follow-up questions. So I'm going to start with legislation, very directly, very briefly, because we have noticed so much improvement in this period of 5 years. It seems that there was a hard work of both executive but also legislative yuan in adopting new legislation. And we also noted that you are also reviewing legislation that was there before you incorporated the convention. So you identified a lot of gaps, regulations and other acts, but the process is not finalized. So my question is, because for some things like that process, you say, we are working on it. So my question is, when do you want to proceed, and are you really sure that you have reviewed really everything? Also, there is a question regarding the Child Protection, Child and Youth Welfare and Protection Act. We have read it. We have received it quite late, and we have read it. And you said that you made, like in your chart, just one intervention, and we believe we need a special discussion on that piece of legislation, so that it is really harmonized with the CRC, and that you can have a comprehensive law on rights of the child in accordance with the CRC. So if someone can tell me a little bit more about that legislation, what was it, how was it, what was it motivated by? It has very welfarean approach, and it has a little bit of, I don't know, some things which are unusual in other laws like that around the world. Also, that's this first issue. The second is National Plan of Action for Children. We know that the government has initiated the drafting of National Plan of Action for Children, but that plan has not developed yet. And there are some sectoral plans, but we would like to ask you, why is not an overall plan of action for children developed? And what are your plans to do that? Because we couldn't read it in your replies to the list of issues. That it is planned, yes, but we don't know more details. Coordination of activities. Yes, we talked about coordination of activities, and we note really with appreciation, and the minister without portfolio is actually doing that very difficult job of coordinating all activities. But this is the Child's Rights group. But what is worrisome is that the Child's Rights group meets 4 times a year. And coordination, in our view, is something that is permanently established, and that a group of people, that a secretariat, employed people on daily basis who actually coordinate activities, and very often they also do state monitoring. So you can do like 2 things, 2 measures within one body, and that saves money. But not just to have a sort of group that meets once in 4 months. That's not sufficient. So we would like your thinking about that, and we like to share our views and how it is normally. What is it that our general comment number 5, which is on the general measures of implementation, it explains everything. Budget allocations, I'm not an economist, so what I've noticed is that the government of Republic of China has placed substantial budget into social protection, child-friendly justice, also social into educating and bringing together social workers. But we hear also from time to time that from different partners, we hear from different partners that actually, and other sources of information, that it's not enough. I don't even know whether for coordination, state coordination, there is sufficient budget to have really a good team. So we need to hear more about budget plannings. When it comes to international cooperation, we are very glad that Taiwan is supporting international projects worldwide, in particular, supporting children in need, like Syrian children and Rohingya children, and there were many listed projects, but we are really interested in whether you can get more expertise, for example, like for better understanding of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and also for better understanding of the optional protocols on the rights of the child. We really wish you to ratify, and the other colleagues are going to talk more about that. Independent monitoring, we are so glad that you have established the National Human Rights Institution. It's a big step for every country. It is a new young institution, but we are really concerned about current situation and about the capacity of National Human Rights Institution to take lead in promotion of the rights of the child and fully address violations of the rights of the child, because it should be a huge office. I mean, this is a huge country. So we are talking about normally having separate ombudsman for children, office of 100, 200 employed people who would be able to receive petitions, but also to work on daily basis on children's issues and to really work independently. This is the body that should be elected in the parliament because it should be independent. With regards to training and education, I have also questions for you, and that is, there are so many training and education going on, and we read it everywhere. So I'm curious as to get from you at least one training program. We would very much like to know what is the contents of training and education, let's say, on the Convention on the Rights of the Child. When you say that the teachers are trained, what is it? When are they trained in the Teachers Academy, or they are trained in a short course? Are they regularly trained? And what is the contents? I mean, if you can share with us maybe one training curricula, because we all have very much experience in teaching and training, and would really like to share that with you and maybe exchange some views if necessary. State monitoring, I already mentioned that maybe it could be incorporated within coordination body, so as to make it cheaper, but to make it like, you know, establish it, endow it within a ministry, and have people coming to work every day to work on child's rights monitoring and coordination. I think that doesn't require many people. Well, there is also something in the end, and it is about access to justice and complaint mechanisms, and I will stop after that. The government introduced a commendable number of complaints procedures for children who believe that their rights have been violated. And now we have, let's say, complaint mechanisms, be it boxes or whatever else, in schools, in medical system, in social, and any other system. I mean, in institutions where children are placed, where they reside, and I guess we haven't come that far, but I guess also in penitentiary institutions that there are some complaint mechanisms. But you know, my concern is those complaints. We know, we already heard, and you're going to talk about it, that very often they don't serve the purpose, and what's worrisome is that children are actually reluctant to complain about anything. So, and we haven't seen really any study which would demonstrate this ratio between occurrences and also the cases that are being processed, that are being complained against. So what is your opinion? Normally there are studies in every country. I'll give you an example. If sexual violence of children is at stake. So in my country, it's like 93% of such cases are never reported. So they are not in the system. It's like when you are COVID positive and you don't go to a medical doctor, but you know you have your own test kit. So you're not registered in the system. So equally, these children, many children who go through grave violence, who go to grave violations of their rights, they actually never end up in any institution, like going to prosecution, police, prosecution court, and perpetrators are out there, they are free. And yes, later we can talk about other issues, but this is for me, in case something was not clear, in case it was too long, I can come with a follow-up question, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you about these issues. Thank you.
Dr. Vukovic, I invite the delegation of the government to respond to those questions, and of course it's your decision who is going to answer which questions, but I leave that to you, and you can follow the order of Dr. Vukovic, or you can follow your own order, as long as you answer all the questions.
Thank you for the questions. First of all, I would like to respond to the question on the child rights group of the Executive Yuan and how often the group convenes. Yes, it's every 4 months.
Committee, if the one who answers the question briefly introduces her or himself, so that we know who is the speaker.
I speak on behalf of the Executive Yuan. So I would like to respond to the question in relation to the child rights group. According to the law, yes, we meet once every 4 months, but we do convene on an ad hoc basis. For example, when it comes to child care, we have convened many times to look into the issues in relation to 0 to 6-year-old and 6 to 12-year-old groups. Moreover, in order to address the problems in relation to sexual abuse of children and youth, in the social safety net program, we have convened many times since we have the program because we want to know the root cause of these problems and what the local authorities are doing to address those problems. For example, whether additional budgets, manpower should be provided. So we have met at least dozens of times a year. So it's not just a meeting every 4 months. As for the Ministry of Health and Welfare, there's another group that is dedicated to the rights of children and youth. So at that ministry, we have another group that is responsible for promoting the child rights. As for budget, well, people may have different opinions because it's a matter of allocation. So the budget for the child, we have been increasing that over time. For example, in order to have more public or quasi-public child care centers or preschools. So we have increased the budget from 10 billion NT to 100 billion NT. So it's been growing very fast in order to meet the expectations of parents so that more child care can be provided through public preschools rather than in the past, 70% of child care services were provided by private operators. But now we are encouraging the establishment of more public care centers. Therefore, but we cannot build so many public child care centers overnight. That is why we are turning some private ones into quasi-public ones. So over 100 billion NT have been invested into this system to serve preschoolers and their parents. So there has been remarkable growth in the budget for the children and youth. Well, yesterday, in terms of the budget for development of children and youth, it seems to be less. That is why when it comes to sporting activities, social participation, we are allocating more budget for those matters. As for the National Comprehensive Action Plan for the CRC, in fact, this year, as I said yesterday, we already have a National Human Rights Action Plan, which has included the non-discrimination, equality, and special protective measures for vulnerable groups are all included in the National Human Rights Action Plan. So in the future, we are going to make additional efforts to focus on particular provisions in relation to the CRC. So we would like to incorporate provisions in relation to international human rights documents in the National Human Rights Action Plan. So these are the efforts made at the central government level. As for the amendments to the Protection of Child and Youth Welfare and Rights Act, I will ask the Ministry of Health and Welfare to answer the question.
Social and Family and Administration, but also on behalf of the Secretaries of Executive Yuan's Child Welfare and Rights Group. 好，那首先有关
First of all, on the legal review, according to Article 19 of our Implementation Act of the CRC, in November 2015, we already made a list of laws and regulations that must be reviewed. And then in 2016 to 2018, we again reviewed the laws, regulations, executive orders, and administrative rules in relation to these laws and regulations to see if they are in line with the CRC. We have reviewed 34 legislations, and 45 provisions are specifically related to the rights of the child. So we have followed the review procedure and completed the amendments. And then in 2021, we required the second review of all regulations. So in that year, we asked all government agencies to review the regulations. And 9 regulations have been included in the list for priority review, and 12 provisions are related to the rights of children. So far, we have reviewed 52 regulations, and 75 provisions are specifically related to the rights of children. For this review, we asked the Child Rights Group of the Executive Yuan to review the list of these regulations on a regular basis to make sure that amendments are made in a timely manner. And 45 regulations and 62 executive orders have been amended. However, there are still 8 regulations and 13 provisions which are not yet amended because the legislative sessions have expired. So those amendments proposals have been returned to the Executive Yuan. In the year 2021, we amended the Protection of Child and Youth Welfare and Rights Act. And we have made 10 amendments so far, in particular, in view of the abuse of children. We have added additional protective measures in view of low birth rates. We have added more child-friendly provisions. In addition, in terms of cyber security and cyber safety for our children, we have added additional protective measures for their online use. So since 2011, we have amended the Protection of Child and Youth Welfare and Rights Act. And the legislators have been very attentive to providing additional protection. So it seems that now, in terms of the overall framework of the Act, it may be inconsistent with the framework of the CRC. That is why our Deputy Minister is taking a serious look into the framework of the Act. And the draft for this particular Act amendment will include the general measures for implementation, as well as the right to civil rights and freedoms, as well as protective measures, alternative care. In particular, we have referenced the United Nations guidelines for alternative care for children.
目前其实很多
Also, currently, many NGOs expect that corporal punishment or bullying should be regulated in the Children and Youth Act. So that's our plan. And in 2019, the Juvenile Justice Act, the Juvenile Delinquency Act was amended. And status offender was removed. Instead, it was stressed that children who were at risk need to receive administrative intervention first. So in the future, the Child and Youth Act would have a special chapter for juvenile delinquents who should receive administrative resources, and so do their families. Also, we work with the social safety net to provide better child protection services. There are also services for families with missing children. There are stipulations regarding health in the Children and Youth Act, especially on some preventive measures to protect the mental health of children and to prevent suicide. All of these will be included in Children and Youth Act. And also children participation, culture. So, in fact, the structure of the Children and Youth Act will be revised to mimic the structure of the National Report on CRC. We have many internal meetings already. We will work with external NGOs, and we will follow up with the revision of the laws. Next, what are the other questions that should be responded by us? Should I respond to all of the questions? Okay. Let me talk about complaints mechanism then. At the child rights group, where the secretariat, currently we ask all the ministries and agencies to conduct self-review. There is a self-review checklist. We ask all the ministries and agencies to use this checklist to check their own mechanism, to see if their mechanism is immediate, is accessible, is confidential, and so on, if they meet all the 6 criteria. When they do the self-check, we ask them to interview children, to ask the opinions from the NGOs as well. So together, everybody can check whether the complaint mechanism fits the 6 criteria. At present, the central ministries and agencies have done some review. The Ministry of National Defense, Environmental Protection, MOI, HW, and so on. So these central agencies have to do the self-check to see if they meet the 6 criteria. If not, then the NGOs propose recommendations to them in order to improve the mechanism. So that's the overall review of the complaint mechanism at the central government level. So my job scope also includes placement. So let me touch upon that as well. For complaints mechanism in placements institutions, there is a 3-tier mechanism. The first tier is the internal complaints within the institution. All the placement institutions have to create an internal mechanism, and this mechanism must be included in the orientation information provided to the children upon their arrival, meaning that children must be aware of their rights to make the complaint upon their arrival. We also have a counseling and checking checklist and our evaluation mechanism to check whether or not placement institutions do implement the complaint mechanism. In the evaluation, we noticed that one of the institutions put a suggestion box in the office of the director. So this suggestion box, therefore, is not accessible. Children wouldn't want to use it. So our reviewers will make suggestions to the institution, ask them to put the suggestion box in a location that is friendly and accessible to the children. At the second tier, the city or county governments need to create an external complaint mechanism. When children are not able to utilize the internal mechanism, they can reach out to social workers or the external mechanisms. The third tier comes back to the central authorities, the Ministry of Health and Welfare. In 2022, we established a operation guideline for recomplaint. So in addition to the children themselves, the state stakeholders, interested parties can all put out the complaints on behalf of the children. We want the children to have comprehensive remedies. When they feel their rights are violated, they can utilize different pathways. In 2022, we also started to investigate. There were 118 institutions, and altogether there were 97 complaint cases. Most of the cases were submitted through internal mechanism. During our investigation, we realized that the number of the complaints was very little. So in 2022, that's why in 2022 we created the complaint operation guidelines so that children can submit their complaint again. So we're seeing the number of the cases is on the rise. So we hope that through this 3-tier complaint mechanism, all children can access the mechanism. So that's the part about complaint. Dear RC members, this is the Department of Protective Services from MOHI regarding the protection for children. I would like to add some comments. In our national laws, including the Children and Youth Welfare Act, Domestic Violence Prevention Act, and the Prevention of Sexual Exploitation Act, and so on, all clearly states that anyone, including children themselves, in case they encounter improper treatment, they can make complaints. We have an e-care website which can receive the complaint, and there's a hotline 113 which works 24/7. There are dedicated social workers on the line to receive the calls. There are other people, for example, medical staff, nursing staff, educators, police officers, preschool teachers, and the teachers or the heads of the neighborhoods. When they are on their duty, when they see that some children are not treated properly. For example, when they suffer sexual exploitation, abuses, and so on, they need to make the reports within 24 hours. If they don't report, they will be punished. So through this comprehensive protection mechanism, we try to protect the rights of all children. This is from National Education Department, from Ministry of Education. So I want to talk about the complaint system on campus. May 26, 2021, the legislature amended a law regarding the complaint system, and the National Education Administration also created a guideline to govern the complaint committee in high school. So if students' unions or other autonomous groups in the school believe that students' rights are violated, such violations are illegal or improper, they can submit a written complaint to the schools within 30 days. And the schools will make a decision on that if students are not satisfied with the results. Upon receiving the decision by the school, they can submit a re-complaint to the committee within 30 days. So that's the appeal system. And if they are not happy with the decision of the appeal, upon receiving the appeal account, they can submit their case to the administrative court for administrative litigations. At junior high school or elementary school, well, according to National Education Act, if children believe that their rights are violated or the discipline is improper, their statutory and agents can submit a written complaint to the schools. If they're not happy with the results, they can appeal to the local authorities. This mechanism is independent and confidential in order to help students become aware and familiar of the complaint system. In all the schools, there are pamphlets about the mechanism, which is accessible to the students very easily. We hope that the schools will include the instruction of the mechanism in the information pack for the students. There are examples, there are questions and answers in the pamphlets. There is the phone for the complaint. For students who are in high school or below, students can learn about complaint mechanism on school websites. I also want to add something because you mentioned the question on education for educators. In 2018, Ministry of Education created a CRC training academy to train the trainers for CRC, to empower the teachers. It organizes workshops so for teachers and the leaders to understand CRC, so that those who work on campus have professional capacity regarding CRC. We also have a pamphlet for the educators, and there is analysis of different cases to help teachers understand the spirit of CRC. We also provide subsidies to local governments. So for junior high school, elementary school, when they want to conduct training, there is funding. So at high school or below, well, 89% of the teachers have received CRC training. As for the heads of the schools, I think, again, 98% of them have received CRC training. And we talk about pre-job training, whether CRC training was included. Yes. So in the pre-job training, in the courses for teachers to be, CRC is included as a professional course. In 2020, we published a book dedicated to human rights education and CRC-related issues.
In addition, in colleges, we also encourage colleges to offer courses on human rights. By 2021, 37 colleges and 173 departments have offered such courses. 98,000 teacher trainees have completed this training. Thank you. Distinguished members of the review committee, good morning. I speak on behalf of the Correction Agency of the MOJ on complaints procedures. I would like to talk about the situation in correctional system. Children and juvenile in correctional institutions, if they are not satisfied with our disciplinary action, then, according to the Detention Act, they can file complaints and they can question the legality of our measures in these institutions. If these measures are found out to be illegal, we will revoke the original disciplinary measures. Again, the complaints will be addressed independently. We will set up a review committee consisting of experts and external impartial members. Again, the review process will be friendly and sensitive to children and youth. Children and youth can file written complaints, or such complaints can be filed by their representatives, statutory agents, and there is confidentiality assurance too. When children are in correctional institutions, we will first give them some lectures as to the remedies they have access to. Again, there's a handbook for them so that they know what complaints procedures there are. In addition, the children or youth can file written complaints not only to school authorities. If they are inspectors, supervisors coming from outside the school, children or students can also file complaints to them. In addition, the juvenile court personnel, social workers, are also potential recipients of their complaints. Well, I think my colleague just talked about the complaints procedures by juveniles and children in correctional institutions based on the Detention Act. But now we are also looking into potential amendments of another guidelines at juvenile correctional or reform schools. There are already relevant guidelines to take care of the complaints procedures. But now we would like to combine juvenile reform schools, correctional institutions together in one guidelines. Chair, distinguished members, on behalf of the Judicial Yuan, I thank you for the questions and welcome you to Taiwan to review our progress since our implementation of the CRC in Taiwan. So in terms of the rights of children in the judicial field, and this is the area where I would like to address your question to access to justice for children. In fact, under the leadership of the Executive Yuan, for all minors under the age of 18, if, for example, now we have abolished the so-called status offenders, rather for at-risk juveniles, we will have some measures, or for juvenile offenders, we will consider them as delinquent matters, or if there are juvenile victims, then at the civil court or criminal court, for instance, if there are child victims of domestic violence, sexual abuse, or if the child is implicated in a custodial dispute when their parents are getting divorced, or, as our colleague from the MOE said, if a child wants to file complaints. So in whatever settings, for whatever causes at the juvenile court, we try to do our best to ensure the child's access to justice while bearing in mind the best interest of the child. Therefore, in terms of laws or other administrative organs of the government, we continuously review whether we have done our part to uphold the rights of the children. So in terms of the Juvenile Delinquency Act and many other related regulations, we are committed to building a child-friendly juvenile judicial environment, and children will be informed about their role in these legal proceedings, so that children and youth, with the company of social workers, can express their views in the courts. In particular, recently, for victim children, we pay even more attention to their rights to express their views. So for at-risk children, as well as child victims, we now emphasize even more their right to be heard. So by building a friendly environment for them to join legal proceedings, we also, as social workers and special education experts, as well as medical professionals, to accompany these children and youth when they show up in the court. We hope we can see these matters from children's perspective. Therefore, we can truly have a child-friendly justice system. And we also have interviewers, special interviewers for children who are victims of sexual abuse. Starting this year, at the Judicial Yuan, we also have a child rights group that is devising a special budget to do what I just described. As for other measures we have taken, please refer to our replies to the LOI. Thank you. The National Immigration Agency from the Ministry of the Interiors, please talk about international cooperation. Chair, distinguished members of the Review Committee, I speak on behalf of the NIA. In terms of international cooperation, we continuously work with other countries and signed MOU with 22 countries. We have signed such MOUs or agreements, and as a result, we can build a cooperative network. We can attend seminars, workshops held in different countries. For example, in Taiwan, every year we organize a workshop on human trafficking prevention, inviting experts from home and abroad to share with us their expertise. Thank you. Thank you. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs, would you like to say something about international cooperation?
And members of the delegation, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. This is Francis Lee from MOFA. I would like to talking about some international cooperation. With regard to the Dr. Ray's, through our international cooperation, do we really get expertise? I think in MOFA's part, we are doing more on sharing resources and to conduct humanitarian programs. And through this, I think our major approach is to learn through practice. So we are submitting more information on humanitarian program and some other related assistance. But I think the expertise is actually, through domestic relevant groups, such as school or children and youth. They are conducting special study trips, foreign trips overseas to get the expertise, or inviting relevant school to conduct some international exchanges to learn the relevant knowledges. So I think many multiple ways to get the expertise. But from MOFA's part, I think we are more focused on sharing resources and conducting humanitarian programs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all these answers. It also indicates that general measures and the discussion about general measures easily flows into issues that will be given further attention in the course of this dialogue, like on education, on alternative care, on the juvenile justice practice, because there are special chapters also in the second report that are dealing with these issues in more details. But thank you very much on your kind of generous information on, for instance, the complaint procedures, the information about the legislation, particularly the specific question of Dr. Vukovic on the act that they recently received and that I understand is under a revision process. So there is, I think, almost all issues are covered in your responses. But Dr. Vukovic, you have a follow-up question? No?
No, except that...
Yeah, your microphone.
I want to thank you for all the clarifications to my questions, and it's now easier for me to understand and to participate in the drafting of the recommendations for your country. I would still like to remind you to send me at least one model, because I'm very much in love of modeling and making programs, and so I would really like to get one of your training program in the area of the rights of the child. Doesn't matter whether it is for school or for this or that, but it would mean a lot to me as a teacher. You know, and then I can compare it to other programs, and I have my own collection. So thank you. Thank you for all the clarifications.
Other members? I have one very specific question. It's a simple question and most likely gets a simple answer. The child rights group, the composition of the child rights group is kind of interesting, reflects the role of different actors in the field of children's rights. There are 5 children members of the child rights group. My question is, how are they elected or selected? Is that done by their peers? Is that done by their father, mothers, and other adult persons? So how do you get the 5 children in the children's rights group?
Excuse me, I have find my answer. Wait.我知道。就是说，我们的中央儿少代表呢，其实是
Well, in fact, the central children representatives are selected from local children representatives. Currently, back in 2019, there was a selection guideline to select the central children representatives. And in 2020, we start to have the central children representatives. All the local governments, well, they also use election to elect 1 to 3 children representatives to join the central children representatives. We can have at most 66 representatives. They have 2-year term. At the beginning, there was a pilot program with 53 children, 28 male, 25 female, including children in special circumstances, for example, children with disabilities from vulnerable families or indigenous communities. Some of the children are homeschoolers. After the pilot program in 2021, we started the first official children representatives cohort. In the second cohort, there were 62. In the first cohort, there were 60. These central children representatives can join 3 different central meetings. At the central level, there are 3 children-related meetings. The first is the Children's Rights Group at Executive Yuan. The second is the Child Rights Group at the MOHW. And the third meeting is a prevention meeting. Every month, we require the children, well, in fact, the children have regular meetings every month, discuss their common interests and concerns. Among the 62 children, they will be divided into 3 groups. In every group, they will select 5 representatives to attend such meetings. The 5 representatives will bring their concerns from the group to the meetings. So, currently, when we organize such meetings, children submit many proposals that are concerned about their participation in school affairs, gender education, education in rural areas, language development, especially local languages, and complaint mechanism for bullying, friendly counseling in schools. These are their concerns. They also want the counseling system to protect their privacy. They care about novel nicotine products. And then due to the tension across the straits, they are now concerned about national defense. They think children should also understand how national defense resources are allocated. So it's a very wide range of their concerns. In addition to attending the 3 central meetings I talk about, with our promotion, we expect that ministries, legislative yuan, judicial yuan, or the control yuan, we expect that when these agencies discuss children issues, they can invite children representatives. So ministries and agencies such as judicial yuan, when discussing friendly court for children, when discussing how to improve the procedures for children in courts, when the Ministry of Labor talks about the protection of children's labor rights, they all invite children representatives to attend. Last year, well, since these children representatives are accompanied by adults to join the meetings, they look forward to a specific meeting in which all the participants are children. So Ministry of Health and Welfare from 2019 to 2022 invited ministries and agencies to organize a meeting, a platform meeting, where only children attended. They submit many proposals. We ask different agencies to respond to their proposals. I will end here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I thought it was a simple question, but I got a very generous answer, and I'm impressed by the way you involve children and get them involved in all kinds of issues at the local and at the national level. That's very good. So, thank you very much for this first round of questions, particularly for your answers. And we move to the second chapter in the system. I don't like the term system, but anyway, in the CRC practice of dealing with reports and discussion about the reports, there is a chapter 2 on the definition of the child. We assume that you all agree on the definition of the CRC, persons below the age of 18, with a possible exception. The interesting information, in my view, is that that exception does not exist in the African Charter for the Rights and Welfare of the Child. The Africans don't make an exception to the rule that all persons under 18 are children. And it is interesting to note, and I come back to that later, that you are considering to lower the minimum age for criminal responsibility from 14 to 12. Anyway, and there are no questions from the committee, and I would like to move to the third chapter, and that is on the articles which are qualified by the Committee on the Rights of the Child as general principles, 2, 3, paragraph 1, 6, and 12. And Professor Laura Lundy has the floor.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for all the work and detailed information so far. As Professor Doak has said, these are general principles. I'm going to keep my questions quite high level because these issues must be explored under education and health and alternative care as well. I'm going to start with non-discrimination, Article 2. And my first question is about your domestic equality legislation. I want to know, do you have a domestic law that covers non-discrimination? Does it cover age as a category? And also, if I'm a child, for example, if I was an Indigenous girl and I felt I was discriminated against, what could I do? What would I do? That's the first question. The second question then is on your data systems. Thank you again for the very detailed information that you gave us. I noticed that you have very good breakdown by sex, boys and girls, sometimes by disability, and sometimes for Indigenous children. My question is whether you are routinely collecting data on children that is disaggregated, for example, in health and in education. If you are, does it, when you cover disability? Disability is a huge range of diverse categories. Is that broken down further? The needs of children with intellectual impairments are very different from physical and sensory impairments. Does it cover children who are LGBTQI? And etc. So have you got a good childhood data collection system? Very specific question on gender equality promotion in schools. Thank you for the information and the steps that have been taken for that. Is it monitored, the quality of that? How would that be checked that schools are doing that and what they're doing is of high quality? And a final specific question relates to children who are stateless and have gone through the ARC process or perhaps have not gone through the ARC. If a child is stateless and has not got the alien registration certificate, what happens when they're 18? That's everything on Article 2. On Article 3, just one question. This is the best interests of the child. Again, thank you for the information. And I think it's excellent that you're collecting case study examples of good practice and training on child rights. Our concern is that the best interest principle is often very misunderstood. And when it is misunderstood, then it can really undermine child rights. So we're wondering about the content of training on best interests, and in particular whether it pays attention to General Comment 14 of the committee, which gives very strong guidance. Article 6, life, survival and development. As you mentioned, you have a very low birth rate, but you also have a very high death rate of children, particularly from suicide and traffic accidents. I have a question about the child death review process. it seems to only apply to children under the age of 6. And my question is why you chose that age, and why you do not have a process for all children under 18. On suicide, I won't say much because so much is related to mental health, which will come back. But I note that in the reasons given for suicide, it often relates very much to the individual child. It says personal reasons. And I want to know what research has been undertaken with children around mental health issues, because they are clearly structural reasons. And children tell us that relates very much to stress and schooling. On road traffic accidents, again, thank you for the reply to the list of issues. But I'm curious about how at a local government level that is enforced. It is enforced that they check whether there are safe journeys to school, safe parking outside school, etc. And finally, on Article 12, I want to note the incredible progress that you have made since 2017. I mean, so much has been done and so much has been implemented in a short time, which is excellent. I had a question about inclusion, but Professor Doak has raised it. I still want to say that there is a concern that the children who are getting involved are still older and quite an elite group. And I think, you know, I'm curious about what you can do to diversify the children that you include. Impact, I want to know what's happened. You've shown us lots of examples of policies and laws that you consulted children. How do you feed back to children, not just the children on the group? How do you let children know what you changed because of their views? And can you give me some examples? What have they done? What has been changed in your law and policy because you involve children? And then finally, one specific question around, are you doing anything to encourage child participation in family life? What is being done, for example, in family education to encourage parents to listen to children? Okay. And finally, in the courts, we've heard a lot about juvenile justice, but I'm curious what happens in family courts. You have a very high divorce rate. If I'm a child and my parents are divorcing, can someone explain how my views would be sought and taken seriously, for example, in custody decisions? Thank you, that's all my questions.
Sir, to delegate the answering or do it yourself?
First of all, the Ministry of Justice, would you like to address the issue of non-discrimination law? Okay, so I'm the Department for Transitional Justice and Human Rights at the Executive Yuan. In response to your question about a potential equality law or non-discrimination law in Taiwan, you mentioned that in terms of the existing laws to combat discrimination, including those in education, employment, and in reference to different groups such as children with disabilities or indigenous children, yes, we have such combating discrimination laws in different statutes different regulations. For example, if it's an indigenous female child, perhaps in a daily life, she encounters discrimination. What can she do? Well, then we will rely on the provisions in different regulations. I think in the future we need to combine these regulations. Right now, the gender equality law will be the basis. For example, in the school setting, the law can be used to find remedies. However, when it comes to the intersectionality of discrimination, there is still room for improvement. That is why in May this year, the Executive Yuan has released the National Human Rights Action Plan, which incorporates many opinions in the concluding observations from international review committees. That is, we should have a non-discrimination law, which means we need to take inventory and review all the existing laws that combat and prevents discrimination. And we need to address the issue of intersectionality of discrimination in the new discrimination law. We expect to have this law by 2024. That is, according to our National Human Rights Action Plan, we expect to propose a draft of non-discrimination law in the year 2024. So this is what my department has been doing, i.e. reviewing existing laws, seeking guidance from relevant groups and stakeholders. Thank you. The data collection, in particular data in relation to health and education. Representatives from the MOE, would you like to start how you collect data? Good morning. So I'm Hualan Xiu from the MOE. On the educational data collection, every year we regularly collect data from schools of different levels. In particular, for students with disabilities, we have separate data collection based on gender, level or severity of disability, location, age, level of schooling. So every year we would release such data. This shows our the importance we attach to children with disabilities, and we do release this data in Chinese and English on our website. Moreover, on gender equality education, in this regard, we have a Gender Equality Education Act. So the central and local authorities as well as schools must set up a gender equality committee consisting of experts on gender equality, scholars, parents' representatives. And in the Ministry of Education, we also have a consulting committee for gender equality, which reviews the policies as well as the curriculum for gender equality education. So we have been actively promoting gender equality in the education system. So we have a very comprehensive system in terms of planning. Moreover, you asked about the traffic accidents. Whether or not we review the traffic situation for children when they go to school. In fact, at the Executive Yuan, we also have a traffic safety, road safety committee, which keeps track of data in this area. Starting this year, we have launched a very big road safety program, which will review the dangerous intersections near schools. So we also ask relevant authorities to go there for site visits to see where traffic accidents are prone to happen near schools. I know that the Ministry of Transportation and Communications, as well as the Ministry of the Interiors, have set aside budgets to improve those dangerous roads and intersections. Thank you. I speak on behalf of the SFAA of the Ministry of Health and Welfare. I will report data on children with disabilities. Through identification and verification, we have a very huge information system. And all relevant services can be found on the system, starting from the local governments, as well as the assessment reports made by social workers, medical professionals. You can find them on the system. And on the system, you can find different types of disabilities. We have disaggregated data, including age. And based on the needs of these groups, for example, what kind of subsidies, assistive tools, or services that are provided, whether or not they attend daycare centers, such data on service provision is also available on the system. For early interventions, we also have a system that is linked to the Health Promotion Administration, as well as the Ministry of Education. So all the databases are linked with one another. Thank you. Thank you. Health Promotion Administration, please. Data collection. Thank you for the questions. I speak on behalf of the Health Promotion Administration on the death cause analysis. In the year 2019, after the Protection Act was amended, the central government must perform death cause analysis and release such findings. Therefore, my administration has followed the law to perform such analysis so that we know the contextual reasons for the death of children so that we can come up with solutions. Such information and data are also provided to relevant ministries so that they can take preventive measures. Right now, we also take into account the characteristics of different localities so that the solutions can be location sensitive. I'll end here. Thank you. Health data, which department is in charge of this? Health Promotion Administration, or please answer the questions. Thank you for the questions. National health insurance has been implemented for 27 years, so we have a lot of data since 1998, and the claims data will be collected in accordance with the ICCD-9 or ICCD ICC 10. Therefore, they are disaggregated based on the cities and counties, etc. And age. How about the LGBTI data? Good morning. The Gender Equality Department from the Executive Yuan speaking. On LGBTI children data, in 2006, we began to promote mainstreaming of gender mainstreaming. So each department and ministry has set up offices to collect such data. My department at the Executive Yuan also has a database, and we have been helping other ministries to collect data in this area. Aside from gender, we would like to include disabilities, ethnicity, age, so that our policy making can be more comprehensive. So in terms of gender-based data, we actually perform site visits to different ministries once every 2 years. And their performance will be reflected in their evaluation scores. As for the LGBT children data, we know surveys on this group can be very sensitive.
So this year, we organize a large-scale questionnaire targeting people who are over 15 but who live in Taiwan. This is an anonymous questionnaire. We commissioned this questionnaire to a LGBTI and NGO in order to understand the students' situation in education, in their career, and in their life as the reference for future policies. Okay, Stateless Children, Ministry of Interior. Hi, this is the Household Department from MOI. It was asked about the residents of stateless children. The immigration agency will also respond to this. For stateless children, if they are adopted by Taiwanese nationals, then they will be naturalized. They will receive Taiwanese nationalities and continue to live in Taiwan. If stateless children now are in the care of some social welfare organizations, then the authorities may help apply for naturalization of such children. I'll end here. Thank you, Mental Health Department. On the suicide issue. On the issue of suicide, well, in the past 10 years in Taiwan, we're seeing slow increase. Children, teenagers, and young people have higher suicide rates. In the past, suicide rate among children was quite low, but in the past 10 decades, due to industrialization, due to less support in the family, we do see a very slow increase of suicide rate among children. In the past 5 years, the suicide rate among young people spiked. But if we take off cases of well, people jumping off from the high buildings, then the rate is not that high because there are more tall buildings, high buildings, skyscrapers. Maybe that's why more people choose to jump from the buildings to commit suicide. On best interest of child. Okay, on best interest of child, SFAA compile a book of examples or instances. It involves medical field, social welfare, judicial, and educational aspects. So I would like to use some time here to explain. In medical field, sometimes children are not able to express their opinions. Then the relevant personnel need to take measures. And for children who have chronic diseases, we want them to have medical autonomy. Sometimes, due to the religion of the parents, they are not willing to send their children for medical help. So how do we balance best interest of child in these cases? That's also included in the book. And in other examples, when children have mental health issues, do they have the right to seek help on their own initiative? On the sphere of social welfare. So we give examples related to placement organizations. Placement institutions tend to put on a show, especially during fundraising activities. They ask the children to perform, but these violate children's best interest. So we use this as an example, or as examples to talk to placement institutions as to what best interest of child is. So we discussed this with them during meetings. Now there are younger parents. Some of them are busy. So they ask the older kid to take care of the younger kid. And that's an example to discuss as well. In judicial field, on family matters, are children's voice being heard? What's the best interest of child in family affair cases or in adoption cases? In correctional systems, we also have examples that we use in discussions with judicial offices. In education field, we discuss the right to association or campus regulations, relationships on campus, if they can use cell phones, and so on. So all of these examples are used to discuss the best interest of right to providers of children-related services. You also ask about children representatives. Maybe your concern is these children are all so-called elite children, but in fact, at local and central level, we encourage diversity among children representatives. So from 2017 to now, local and central governments already have in total 39 children with disabilities to join public discussions. They also join the international review of CRC and CRPD reports. In addition to children with disabilities, there are also indigenous children, children from vulnerable families, and children who had placement experience. So we have them as children representatives. Then they can talk about their experience in placement institution because they have first-hand experience. They say that their rights to be heard should be better protected, and so on. And you also ask about what policies or laws are changed because of the opinions raised by the children. Well, and at Children's Rights Group at the Executive Yuan or Ministry of Welfare, they submit many proposals regarding the right to association. So the Social Association Act now is on the list to be reviewed. We ask the relevant authorities to guarantee that children also have the right to association. We also ask children to participate to discuss administrative measures against online bullying. Now, we have a children impact assessment draft. So we picked 64 pieces of laws and regulations to conduct the impact assessments. And the Ministry of Welfare and Ministry of Education need to select at least 5 laws to conduct impact assessment first. When the laws receive any revision, such impact assessment has to be done. And in the first stage of the assessment, children must be invited to participate in during the revision of the laws. Children's opinions must be sought. When creating laws, there should be evidence-based elements regarding children to be included. So when children's impact assessment is included in the legislation process, then children will have more opportunities to be heard, to express themselves. Okay, MOE on family education. Are children's voice heard in the family? I also want to add some information to children representatives. Are they all elite children? Well, in fact, an MOE also have a children advisory group. When we look for children representatives, we ask very widely any child who would like to join. Of course, we have a selection process, and we selected the best representatives. For these representatives, we make sure that there is a balance of proportion. Some of them are from urban area, some from rural area, some from indigenous community, some from migrant community. Their concerns are very wide, including dress code, complaint mechanism, proportion of children representatives, mental health, school meals, and so on. As for how their opinions change the policy, well, in fact, in an article for high school governance, a revision is made to have at least 1/8 of the participants who should be children at school affairs meetings. This is one of the case, and the other case is that because of their opinions, the MOE decided to change the governing principle for dress code in junior high school and elementary school, as well as to have better complaint mechanism. Now, on family education, of course, this is a concern of children's. They suggest MOE and local government to pay attention to children's issues when governments provide family education services. At MOE, at the National Education Administration, we encourage city governments and county governments to provide more channels for children to participate in public affairs. Judicial Yuan, next. Thank you. You asked, in case of divorce in a family affairs procedures, how to protect children's rights and how to protect their right to be heard. So thank you for the question. In the first round, during my brief comments, I mentioned that whatever procedure it is, we do care about children's voices when parents are getting divorced. Divorce by agreement or divorce by court decisions are all possible. In 2021, there was a revision to Family Affairs Act, and the Civil Codes 1055-1 all included children's right to be heard in such procedures. So if parents are getting divorced and when a custody decision is to be made, then the court will understand or find out what the children really want. So even when parents are divorced or separated, we want to minimize the impact of the divorce so that they still enjoy the right to be cared for the family.
So since 2012, procedure-wise, well, aside from the request or application for family intermediation that has become available, parents will have an opportunity to engage in dialogue with their children. In other words, even though parents are divorced, the child's rights should not be affected. We have referenced the German system, the use of guardian ad litem. So in the intermediation stage, the guardian ad litem can help us to tap into the child's opinion and thoughts. Aside from such guardian ad litem, we also have family affairs investigators. So when the court is going to make a decision in relation to the child, aside from social workers sent by local authorities to look into the situation, the judge can now assign such family affairs investigator to conduct an investigation to have the child express their views. In fact, yesterday afternoon, we have invited speakers from the UK and Germany to look into procedure improvements that can be made in this area. That is how child's rights can be protected in a divorce proceedings. So in Taiwan's culture, in the past, children were encouraged to listen, not to speak out. Therefore, when we have such a rising divorce rate, it is important that we respect the child's developmental stage and hear him or her out. And whether or not the parents have been trying to sabotage the other party's relationship with the child, we will be able to hear more information. And through such professional assessment, we hope the child will be heard And in particular, we need to have a child-friendly environment where the parents will not weaponize their relationship with the child in the divorce. So that's what we have been doing. Thank you.
Okay.
Working? Just want the question on the child death review mechanism. It applies to children under 6. Can someone just explain that to me, why that age?
On this issue, the Health Promotion Administration has followed Article 13 of the Protection of Child and Youth Welfare and Rights Act. And when we've performed such analysis, basically, we would have such meetings at local cities and counties, even though we, according to the law, only need to perform death cause analysis for those under the age of 6. But we have been discussing with local governments that we should include those under 18 as well. Well, I would like to respond to the question, because for those under the age of 6, there are more cases of child abuse, and there may be children who may die from illness. That is why we start with those under the age of 6. But we are also discussing maybe we should also analyze the deaths of those aged between 6 to 12, 12 to 18, for example, whether traffic accidents, fires, earthquakes, young children may be hurt or die in these accidents. So we may look into that as well. And for older children, they may have died in accidents. Therefore, at my administration, we have been collecting data and analyze data based on the ICD-10 so that we will be able to tell whether children have died in car accidents, drowning accidents. As for mental health, we have noticed that, in particular, among teenagers, the suicide rate has been rising. We may not be able to perform death cause analysis. However, for those who committed suicide, or especially for those who have committed suicide ain't saved, we will perform analysis why they committed suicide in the first place. Again, for children who have been admitted to preschools, kindergartens, elementary school, middle schools, according to our guidelines for campus safety, any death of children will have to be reported to the authorities. And every year, we invite experts and scholars to perform analysis on the death of children and youth. Therefore, every year, on a regular basis, we do compile data on such campus safety incidents and perform analysis too. Thank you.
One remark on death review. There is a well-developed system already for decades in California on the review of death of children, particularly young children, but not only. The reason is that they like to identify risk situations for children. Because if that child was dead by the result of abuse by the parents, and those parents have other children, that knowledge is important to arrange for the protection of the other children in the family. So, and they have been developed since last century, I think. There is another very specific question that is also on the right to be heard. So, my parents are divorcing. I'm 12 years old. And I'm wondering, because I heard that that I would be heard, but I don't hear anything from the court. So the very specific question is the court inviting children to be heard? Is there a letter going to the children and say, listen, you are invited, and explain why they are invited and about what they are, should be heard, day and time? And is that sent to children above a certain age? And if that is the case, what happens with the children below that age? Otherwise, is there a age set for the right of the child to be heard in court? First, I'll tell you what we do in the Netherlands. I've been a juvenile court judge, so I know what happens in the Netherlands when we try to hear children. But first, the question, is there an answer to that question? Because, you know, a lot of children in the Netherlands, 30,000 every year, are part of a process of divorcing parents. And in your country, perhaps a similar number of children. So it's important to know how the right to be heard in practice is organized. Any answer?
The Judicial Yuan, please. Thank you, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to explain the practice in Taiwan's family court. In fact, since 2012, we have the amended Family Affairs Act. So if the parents are divorcing, even though the child is not a party to the proceedings, given the impact of the divorce on the child. So in Article 106 of the Family Affairs Act, the legislators demanded that the court must seek out the child's opinions. In other words, the child is deemed as a party to the proceedings. And as I said, and as you said, the age issue, according to our law, for any child over the age of 7, they have the capacity to engage in the proceedings. So that's why we have the guardian ad litem in place. The guardian ad litems may be a social worker, mental counselors, or a psychologist. The judge, depending on the case, can decide which guardian ad litem should be invited. So when the child comes to the court, the judges try to hear him or her out. And in practice, we have a playroom next to the court room, and there will be a judicial affairs or family affairs investigator to keep the child company. In some cases, maybe the child is just a baby, a toddler, unable to express views. Then is it necessary to have a guardian ad litem to help him or her? That can be discussed, or the judge can approach the child, observing how the child interacts with his main caregiver. And then we can have the family affairs investigator perform more investigations. If the child is capable of expressing views, then we will have the child in the court, but not exactly in a formal proceeding setting. Maybe in the playroom, in the courthouse, we can engage the child to understand how the child the relationship between the child and the parents, what the divorce may impact him in different ways. And we will also try to find the right company for the child when the child is in the court so that the child feels safe and secure. There will be some preparation beforehand, explaining to the child why he needs to be here in the court and what the proceedings will take place and what impact there will be on his life. For example, whether the parents have tried to influence the child in his opinion about the divorce. So these are the actions we take in practice. And in May this year, our Constitutional Court, through a interpretation, has specifically required that for any divorces, the child should be deemed as a party to the proceedings, and the best interest of the child as well as the rights of the child to be heard must be upheld, and some experts' assistance may be sought after. But all in all, we want to make sure that the child knows what impact there may be because of the divorce of his parents on his life.
Thank you very much for this information. It's very helpful for understanding the practice of practicing the right of the child to be heard. Talking about child-friendly environment, which is quite an issue. You want to know where the child feels her or himself most comfortable? That is in the house where he or she is living. So judges can go to that house and hear the child, as I did, and the children feel very comfortable. And it's so nice to see what kind of activities they do in their room in terms of games and the other activities. Children are then feeling very kind of safe in the location where they are living. Anyway, there is much more on the party issue, whether the child can appeal from the decisions in the juvenile, in the divorce case, but I'm not going to into that discussion. I have a short consultation with the members of the committee. We were discussing our and your mental health, considering the possibility of having a break. But it's already 11. We stop at 12. If you take a break, we have only 40 minutes left. That's the practice. So we were in agreement on the answer to that question. We continue till 12, and the floor is for Professor John Tobin, who will deal with what is known as the 4th chapter or cluster, and that is on civil rights and freedoms. That's a section that makes it possible to have very heated discussions, but he will control that particular part of it.
Thank you, and thank you again for being here today and for your very generous insights. I'm always amazed by how much work has gone into your efforts in preparing the reports, and it's taken very seriously and greatly received, so thank you. My reading of the reports is that, in fact, this chapter is not as contentious as some of the other issues we'll be talking about this afternoon, but I'm quite happy for my colleagues to intervene as well. So I have two broad themes I'd like to explore. One is around the issue of freedom of expression and access to ideas, and the second is around the right to privacy. So on that first issue around freedom of expression and the right to access ideas, I'm very interested in the way in which Taiwan deals with the internet and the emerging challenges in that space. So my first question then goes to the issue of access to the internet as a way of both receiving information and expressing ideas. Particularly interested to know what you are doing as a nation to ensure access to children, particularly in remote and rural areas of Taiwan. I understand that access coverage is very extensive and wide, but there are still some gaps. The second issue in terms of access to internet is particularly relating to children with disabilities and particularly children who may be visually impaired. So what special measures are you adopting to ensure that those children have effective access to the internet to both receive ideas and express information, express ideas? The second series of questions goes to the education for young people across the board, and my questioning goes to at what age does this begin in terms of empowering young people to understand the ability to use the internet as a way to both receive information but also to express ideas. So I'm very keen to know what's happening within schools and at what age that process starts. If it's a dedicated program, curriculum that allows children, as I said, to both understand the capacity to receive information but also to express their ideas. The third sort of set of questions relating to the internet then is the issue of regulation and how, of course, to manage the challenges that arise for young people in terms of content that may be not appropriate for their age or development as well. So I understand there are some measures that have been taken around classification of information, around regulation, but I'm very keen to know what you are doing as a state to ensure, or as a government, to ensure the effective regulation of the internet in a way that manages that balance between protection and empowerment, which is a difficult thing to straddle sometimes as well. I'm also keen to know how you engage children in the process of best understanding how to both educate children about the internet, but also how to regulate access to and content on the internet. In relation to the issue of the right to privacy, there are some comments in the reports from NGOs around health examinations in schools, including examinations that extend to children's genitals. I'm very concerned as to why that would ever be required. I'm also interested to know what rights children have in those circumstances to refuse such examinations, but also the process for enabling a school to undertake the examination. So I've read that in fact consent is sought from the parents, but I'm curious to know whether in fact the views of children are sought and what happens if in fact there is some inconsistency between parents and children with respect to those examinations within schools. The last issue around privacy goes to the issue of managing data. So in my own country right now, we're having serious leaks of confidential information on every level, which is becoming a serious issue in Australia. I've heard this morning that in fact Taiwan is undertaking significant efforts to manage data, particularly for children, and a whole range of issues which is to be encouraged. The challenge, of course, now is the need to ensure we protect access to that data at all levels, at the school, in terms of young people having access to their peers' data, but the high level as well in terms of protecting the use of data between government departments and how it's shared and who has access to that data as well. So I'm very curious to know what measures are being taken there to protect children's data and their right to privacy. Thank you.
NCC and then Ministry of Digital Affairs. Dear RC members, I'm from NCC. Let me take on the question regarding online safety for children. There's a diverse range of online content, and in democracies, government try not to intervene too much regarding the content of the internet. So the service providers usually need to self-regulate. It is the same in Taiwan. But when such self-regulation is not effective, when the content is damaging public interest or children's interest, then we will use the public power to intervene. NCC follows Article 46 of the Children and Youth Act to prevent children from coming in contact with content, online content that may hurt their health. The government asks the private sector to set up a organization called iWin. That's a content classification organization. So on age-appropriate content, on screening content. Well, first let me talk about classification. In fact, there was a regulation that was abolished in 2011 or so. So now we rely on self-regulation. App Store and Google markets have to regulate themselves. They need to put a rating on their applications, put on some warnings. The classification or the ratings may be different in different countries. So parents in Taiwan can set an age limit to limit what applications children can download from App Store or Google Store. Line TV or Netflix also have ratings so that children can access to age-appropriate content. So the account can be managed in a way to set an age limit. Parents can use that tool too. As for age authentication, this is a gatekeeping approach. And iWin creates a framework to decide what content needs to put age authentication as a requirement. For many years, I will continue to talk to service providers and discuss how to prevent children from reaching inappropriate content. So age authentication is often used through credit card authentication or through ID authentication. As for screening application, well, iWin has a special section on its website suggesting some content filtering applications. So parents are encouraged to install these applications. This specific section on the website is updated constantly. The MOE application can also be used by the parents or the teachers to put on age limits. And iWin also put on a blacklist of inappropriate content. When iWin is not able to reach platform provider, or when the provider is not able to set up a good gatekeeping system, or it fails to remove inappropriate content, then this provider will be put on a blacklist. So MOE's application and Chunghwa Telecom's application will filter out these websites. Telcos also provide good screening applications. Or Taiwan Mobile or Far Eastern, these are all telcos that provide good applications to screen out the content. ISP providers also offer a safekeeping mechanism. In order to encourage providers to screen out the content, a framework by iWin helps service providers to have a common understanding as to what content is not suitable. And there's a multi-stakeholder meeting organized every year to discuss what content should be listed as inappropriate, how to deal with inappropriate content in order to form consensus among self-providers. And if complaints are filed against some providers, they know what to do to improve.
Every year, in terms of specific topics, training will be provided for the platform operators through the iWin's work. For example, communication with Twitter or Dcard. Communication has been going on a regular basis between iWin and these platform operators. In order to enhance people's digital literacy, iWin is also taking action to help parents, students, teachers, and the general public to attend workshops on cybersecurity. Topics covered include cyber literacy, online dating, fraud prevention, intimate images, personal information protection, screening, software, and mechanisms for children to seek help if they have cybersecurity problems. In addition, for the frontline social workers, teachers, and parents, there are additional training courses for them. Moreover, on an annual basis, throughout different parts of the country, we organize large fairs to attract parents and children to learn about cybersecurity. Games are used as the means to instill such knowledge. Different agencies, institutions are also using their Facebook fan pages to present such information. Moreover, games have been developed along with platform operators. So there are multiple ways to disseminate such information to help our children to be informed about issues related to cybersecurity. Last but not least, iWin also receives complaints from parents, students, children, and youth. Online activities, face-to-face activities are also organized by iWin to help the stakeholders to know how to protect themselves in an online environment. I'll end here. The Digital Development Ministry, please. So, under the relevant law, we do have a game rating system. So we have a regulation to govern the rating of different games, software, including 5 categories: parental guidance for different age groups of children, or general category, protective category, and restricted category. We also asked game developers to provide such rating information when they launch these online games. On the websites, they also need to have a dedicated section to provide information about protection for children and youth in the cyberspace. My administration also performed random checks of these online games to see if they comply with the rating. If they fail to comply, we will tell the operators to make improvements. We also engage in on-campus promotions so that children will learn what kind of dangers may be lurking online, such as cyberbullying, sexual exploitation, fraud. We also tell young people not to transmit or upload their intimate images to strangers online. In addition, there are also activities organized to educate parents along with children about the use of online games. We also have some camps, performance camps for children, so that these children can engage in these activities and learn about cyber security issues. Next, representatives from the MOE, please talk about how to narrow digital divide, especially the one between the country and the rural area, the urban areas. Well, for the high school, basically, for middle schools, basically we have 100% coverage of wireless network in all schools. And also you can see the connecting speed is over 1 gigabit per second for on-campus backbone network. And for the bandwidth connecting to the school network from outside school is also over 300 megabits per second. For schools in the rural areas, their conditions may differ from one school to another, so we do provide some flexibility in local schools when they propose short-term online education schemes to ensure the students' right to education. Also, we subsidize the Public Television Service Foundation to make teaching videos which can be aired in rural areas, especially during the pandemic school shutdowns. So these are the efforts we make to bridge the gap. Furthermore, in terms of the screening system, the MOE is also working with the iWing, which provides us with a blacklist. And on the campus internet, we do apply the blacklist to block actually 490 million incidents from those blacklisted websites. So the blockage rate is very high. When students go home and use mobile devices to go online, we also work with a company, Trend Micro, to launch the Network Guardian Angels software. Over 90,000 downloads have been made of these particular software. Again, from MOE, students' health examination, we know that students spend most of the daytime in schools. If we ask students to go to hospitals to perform health examinations, the time may be a problem. The parents may not be able to accompany their children to the hospital because they have to work, or when the parents may be working out of town, the grandparents are taking care of the kids in some rural areas. That is why health examinations are carried out by the school authorities once a year. This health examination will be carried out. Can children decline to be examined? Yes, they do have the right to say no. And actually, the school would also send an informed consent form to the child and the parents. Before the health examination can take place, the parents must sign the informed consent form, which will explain the items in the health examination, the procedures, the dates, the time, so that the parents will be fully informed. The parents should discuss with their kids, with the consent from their children. The informed consent form will be signed by the parents and given back to the school before the health examination will be carried out on the children. Most parents tend to agree and sign the form. The purpose of such examination is to detect any health problems and make treatment available as early as possible. As for the examination of the abdomen or the genitals or private parts of children, again, in the informed consent form, there will be very detailed explanation, and the parents will have to tick the box to show if they agree that particular part of the child's body can be examined. And the parents can then take their own kids to a different hospital for such examination, and then return the examination reports to the schools. That will do. The MOE also has a manual for students' health examination, and the handbook stipulates that when the examination of the student's private parts is carried out, there must be a curtain to protect the privacy of the child. With the exception of medical professionals, no person should be present when the examination is ongoing. If the child is found to be overweight or have some sight problems, the results will be sent back to the parents so the parents can take the child for further treatment. Thank you. Again, from the MOE, you ask about visually impaired children and their use of computers. At a local university, we have a assistive tools development center for these children with impairments. So we provide these visually impaired students with the computers that they can use. So such assistive tools have been made available to them. We also ask experts to design additional tools to help these impaired visually children to access information online. If there's no adequate assistive tools or equipment to meet their needs, we also have assistance in schools to help these children to use computers.
you so much for those very detailed answers. Just one quick follow-up question. With those school examinations regarding a child's health, at what age do they start and at what age does it finish? Does it go all through primary and secondary school, or is it finished at, say, for example, age 12?
Would you repeat the question? Thank you. Oh yeah, it's 12 years old as a mark. Yes, we have a implementation plan for children who are in junior high school and elementary school. Oh, sorry, it's 15 years old. 15 years old. It includes children in junior high school and elementary school. Thank you.
Okay. A follow-up question by Dr. Vukovic.
Thank you, Jaap, and thank you all of you for providing such elaborate information for us that will definitely help us clarify whatever we read here and the information that we got from other sources, really so many. And that was my concern in the beginning, and then I see that it really is reflected in all other areas of the rights of the child, and this is the question of data collection, the way they are collected. But more than that, I have a feeling, may correct me if I am wrong, that Taiwan is very good in collecting statistics and has a lot of statistics, and is very good in making charts and plans, very detailed, very perfect, which is really a reflection of a very serious thinking about structures and how to get organized and everything. But my question is, I'm able a little bit of concern, who does actually research, analysis, evaluations? Is it universities? Is it like I hear from my friends, and you know what we did in our universities? We use those data and then we work with them, and then we do a lot of analysis and we come to amazing conclusions. So do you have research institutes, like specifically for, let's say, social studies, or family research institute, or I don't know, some legal research institute, or your universities do that? Because very often, even I have a question when I look into the chapters in your list of, in your state report and the replies to the list of issues. I wonder, okay, there are so many data, but I still don't know what is done with those data. I didn't see any report, any research, any result. So if you can tell us more about that, that process of scientific research and working with those statistics, wonderful statistics and data for the actually purpose of being able to compare and being able to match, or maybe to assess how useful were some measures that you introduced and on which you have data, but then we don't know how to measure the effectiveness and to see where we are after all this time, as my colleagues already indicated. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vukovic. I add a question, whether you have an example of how statistic data changed your law or your policies. Is there because it's an impressive body of numbers and figures, and sometimes figures go down and that's a concern, and sometimes they go up and it is not a concern. But the question is whether, if it is a concern, whether that has an impact on your policy and legislative activities on children's rights.
National Health Administration, how do you provide the stats to researchers or scholars?
在这边做一个简单的说明。我刚才有报告过，我们其实有一个很庞大的资料库，从84年到现在，总共有27年的民众的健康资料。那当然会搭配像国健署或社家署等等相关单位的相关的资讯，把它汇整起来。那我们会去做一个归户的资料库，让有兴趣的学者或是机构，他可以去申请。那本署是有订定相关的办法，他只要来申请过后，我们会透过一个机制去。
不好意思，我们打断一下，委员。
We have a huge testing 1, 2, 3. We have a huge database. Testing. This is the English channel. Good. So we have, let me briefly. We have a huge database, and we work with SFAA and National Health Administration. We integrate all the data, and we open up for the use of researchers. So researchers or research institutes can apply to use the data. If they are interested, they submit their research programs to us and apply to use the data. We have committee members to evaluate that, okay, this data can be made available to the researchers, and the researchers can conduct the research. Usually, researchers have to go to a closed environment. They cannot take the data away. They can come here to access the data, but they cannot take the data away. This is to protect the privacy of all the people. So this is my brief response to your question. Next, Department of Protective Services. How do you collect and use data related to children? And then MOE can talk about how you use campus data. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your question. This is Department of Protective Services of the Ministry of Health. On the long term, we collect data on children abuse. We have statistical data. After a while, we analyze the forms of abuse and the relationship between the abuser and the abused. In this process, we discovered that there have been some serious cases that need to be submitted to the judicial proceedings so that they can have judicial intervention, so that police officers and the social workers as well can work together and provide intervention. So in the Children and Youth Act, some provisions have been amended so that this practice can be realized in order to provide better protection for children. Now, on death review, and the reason why they focus on children who are under 6, we discovered that most of the serious cases that lead to death happen to children who are under 6. Family factors, and so on, and the fact that these families are isolated, they don't receive support, so we think they are at-risk families, and therefore in our legislation we add the death review for children who are under 6. Also, we see that some cases, if they happened, they are serious cases, and therefore these cases have to be prevented. And therefore, in the social network program, we put the primary and the secondary prevention in the community setting. It is not official legislation yet, but this is how we want to improve the protection through practice. And we have this practice because we have the data and the numbers. Thank you. This is the MOE. There are 2 points I want to add. How we analyze children-related numbers. For example, we have top 5 causes of death in accidents. So traffic accident, drowning, falling from height, accidental hazards, and drug use. These are the top 5 causes of death of children. So we develop we develop 5 educational materials focusing on these 5 causes, and these resources are made available for the schools so that we can prevent such death in the future. Second, MOE follow the number of dropouts. We want to know if they come back to school after counseling. We want to know the rates of returning to school. And we analyze the causes of dropouts. Is it because of individual factor, family factor, health factor, economic reasons? So we were able to decide which factors are the most significant, and if it is because of individual cause, then we add more headcount to the counseling team in the school, also including more social workers or therapists to have more staff in the counseling center in school. If the cause is family factor, then we work with social administration. We integrate with welfare resources to help improve the function of the family. If the cause is economic reason, for example, children need to work. Of course, they have to be of age in order to work. Some of the students leave high school because they need to work. So we want to provide them with jobs on campus, provide them with subsidies. We try to match them. Children who are 18 years old with labor services so that they can have safe and stable jobs. So what I want to say is that Ministry of Education utilizes children-related data. And based on this data, we improve the policies to provide a better environment for children to learn and to grow, to develop, so that they have a more stable life. Thank you. This is Executive Yuan. I want to talk about the National Research Institute. We have a National Health Institute in Taiwan, which is a research institute. It focuses on health issues. There is a small group focusing on children's health and welfare in this research institute. There is also the National Science Council. They have 2 long-term, large-scale databases, one on education from elementary school to high school, in order to understand what education is like for different generations of students. Has our education changed? And does the education change them or help them get better jobs?
In addition, they also perform a collection of data of Taiwan's households, families, and college professors, university professors can propose research projects and use the data from these 2 databases. And their research reports can be published. They also serve as important reference for the government's policy making. And sometimes the government also invites them or recruits them as advisors based on their research conclusions. I'll end here.
Any publications? Are there any publications? So you collect the data and there is research and analysis. People can come to do analysis, and there is the institute. And so are there publications where that can be presented? Because it would be also useful to see such articles internationally, but are there national magazines or any publications where it is presented, all those results, and where, for example, students who want to learn about rights of the child can collect, let's say, articles and books and domestically and learn more about it?
Such findings have been published internationally or domestically in journals at home or abroad, so they are readily accessible and they are also open to the public. But for some research, it's policy-based research. In other words, we commission some scholars to perform such research, and their research will be fed into the policy making. Basically, different government ministries will also conduct research. In this regard, we have a government research information system or government research bulletin. There's an English version to that. So when we formulate policies, or if scholars are interested in these issues, they can also go to this bulletin to find the relevant information. I'll end here. Thank you.
It's to you. So you mentioned earlier that you were conducting child rights impact assessments. And I think that's wonderful and really important. And my question is that just in your unit and department? And are those child rights impact assessments happening across ministries?
This child rights impact analysis is performed across different ministries. Currently, it's still on a pilot basis, and we have a consulting group consisting of NGO representatives and experts and scholars. They will pick the laws and the legislations that should be used to perform such rights impact analysis. 64 of them have been chosen. Most of them are regulations from the Ministry of Health and Welfare and the MOE. So in the first phase, we will focus on 11 laws to perform this child rights impact analysis. Afterwards, we have a mechanism to review whether some improvements or changes to the existing institutions are needed.
So it's about at the end of this session. I have one question that I need to ask because the Constitutional Court of this country made a decision that children should be considered as party in divorce cases. So I am 12 years old. I am one of the 3 children. The court, after a lot of discussion and mediation and all that, decided that the children were going to live with the mother. I'm a 12-year-old boy, so I don't like that decision. And the question, therefore, is, can I appeal from that decision as a party to the process? You don't need to answer the question, but I want to have the question after lunch.
We still have a few minutes left. Maybe the Judicial Yuan representative can answer the question. Thank you for the question. For the follow-up question, I said that in 2012, the Family Affairs Act already included the children's right to attend procedural judicial hearings, and a guardian ad litem can be assigned to help the child, and the guardian ad litem can independently file appeal on behalf of the child. For example, in your case, the boy doesn't want to, say, live with the father, then the guardian ad litem as if the father is the guardian ad litem can file appeal to the court on behalf of the child. And the guardian ad litem's opinion doesn't have to be identical with that of the parents. And during the high court proceedings, the guardian ad litem can again express views on behalf of the child. Therefore, if the child is not happy with the court decisions, the child can definitely express the views, because this decision is going to impact the child's life in the future. I wonder if I have answered your question. If you have any follow-up questions, please let me know before the lunch. That's okay.
at the microphone from time to time tells me I don't want to work with you anymore. But now it works again. There is one issue that is important and needs attention, and it's part of the Civil Rights Freedom, Chapter 4. And Dr. Nigel Cantwell will raise the question, and it's, I hope you have good food for lunch, but it is also a piece of food for lunch because we want the answer after lunch. Dr. Cantwell has the floor.
Thanks very much. The focus is on identity on Articles 7 and 8. And first of all, I'd like to actually ask a follow-up question in relation to what the Ministry of Information said on stateless children this morning. I'd like to understand a little more clearly the actual responsibilities or let's say actions taken by the authorities in relation to stateless children who may be in the care of the state. As far as I understood, the response was that the authorities may help to apply the child to apply for naturalization. And I want to understand what the significance of the word may is there. Is it that it may decide to? Is it that it is allowed to? Or is it that it will? It seems to me that that this is a very fundamental issue, because we are aware that statelessness affects relatively few children, but that when it does affect them, it is of absolute significance in terms of their lives and best interests. So that's the first question, which should be easy, I think, to answer. The other questions I have are in relation to donor-conceived children and children born of surrogacy. In the response to the list of issues, it was noted that surrogacy is not legalized in Taiwan, which is fine. But my understanding is that there are children born of surrogacy who are in Taiwan, and presumably that they are born abroad through surrogacy abroad and then integrated into Taiwanese society. And I'd like to know what the status of those children is, given that surrogacy is not legal in this country. And particularly, I'd like to know what their situation is in relation to birth registration, in relation to their family relations, and in particular there in relation to the identity of the surrogate mother, the birth mother, whether they have automatic nationality of Taiwan, residence rights, and access to basic services. This is an important question. I mean, most countries of the world do not allow surrogacy, but our concern is very often that children born of surrogacy find themselves in these countries and their legal and other status may be unclear. And I'd like to know exactly what the situation is in relation to Taiwan. And even if it is hypothetical, if an illegal surrogacy took place in Taiwan, what would be the status of the child born of surrogacy? So that's the first question. And the other question relates to donor-conceived children. Here, my understanding is from the responses to the list of issues that that children who are donor-conceived in Taiwan cannot access information as to their origins unless they later in life adopt or are adopted or marry. And my concern, therefore, is why are they not permitted to access, why are they not permitted access to information about their origins simply for reasons of knowing their origins? And I say this in a context worldwide where donor-conceived children are becoming increasingly vocal as to their right to know their origins, and presumably this is or will be the case in Taiwan in the coming years. We would very much appreciate the response of the government on those questions, as the chairman said, presumably after lunch. Thank you.
Dr. Cantwell, the answer will be after lunch. As I said, it's lunchtime. We are supposed to be back at 2 o'clock. That's correct?
Yes, 2 o'clock.
Okay. Have a very nice lunch and be in full shape back here for the afternoon session. Meeting is adjourned.
好，谢谢各位参与我们上午的会议。
Thank you very much for being here. Lunch boxes are provided on the 4th floor. Please bring the voucher to the 4th floor. You should have your voucher in your badge if you register today. If you signed in yesterday, please go to the desk to get a food voucher. If you only sign in today, you have your voucher in your badge. If you signed in yesterday, please go to the desk to get your voucher. Lunch boxes will be provided on the 4th floor. Please take the elevators or the escalators to reach the 4th floor.
12点半会在这个会场进行清场跟换场作业，请各位记得携带你的随身物品。如果各位贵宾，如果您是下午不再参加会议的与会者，也请记得归还您的口译设备还有识别证。如果你下午没有再参加我们下午场次的会议，也请记得归还口译设备以及识别证。谢谢大家。我们稍后的会议呢，下午的会议会在2点的时候准时开始。
Judge, yeah, because I heard that you are a specialist in family law and also a judge before.
I was a judge.
Yeah, very nice to meet you.
Yeah. Okay. So.
This is our